started. So it's poly sand time on this Patio Restoration, and you can see where he's slicing the bag and bending over to keep it low, and then he is taking the sand and moving in an S pattern. And what all of this does is it helps to keep the polymers and the sand well mixed so they don't separate. So if you just dump the bag, you would end up with the pieces flying and the particles separating, and then you wouldn't have an even mix for those joints. So normally you would want a mask for this part, but so you can hear me, I don't right now. Once you have all the bags dumped and you've done your S pattern, now you want to get your broom and you want to go and line yourself up on a 45-degree angle with the bond lines, and take your broom and just start working your sand like this back and forth to get it inside of the bond, in the joints, like that. The other important tip is that when you're doing this, it might seem counterintuitive to start in the middle of the patio, but you want to make sure you have the main field taken care of first, because all of this sand, one, you'll have leftovers generally that you can use on the around the edges. The edges are usually a little bit bigger and they're going to suck up a lot of more sand. So make sure you get the field, and then after that, at the end, use your leftovers for the border. And if you, for some reason, run out, if you're short on sand, you can always go back and touch that up later. So that's going to be an easier fix. Over the pavers, vibrate the sand in place. There was a lot more sand on the surface, and what that compactor does is it vibrates it down into the joints further. Otherwise, if you just sweep it in and let it go, you could have a surface level compaction, or I'm sorry, surface level layer of sand. And it's not all the way down in the joints, helping to interlock those pavers together. So where there was a lot of sand on the surface, a lot of it's been sucked down in the joints. This is a Harbor Freight stamper. And I'll say this is the only time we ever use it on a job site. It's light duty enough to run on the surface, and occasionally you have a cracked one that you need to replace, but it fits this application and it's not suitable to use for preparation of base. ICPI calls for a much larger compaction force than this. The rubber mat, and it helps so that you don't scratch the surface of the pavers, but also that mat has holes like a honeycomb looking or Swiss cheese kind of pattern. I'll say it's regular, not Swiss cheese is random, but in any event, the holes take in some of the sand and push it around to help move it to some of the other places where you need it in the joints that you didn't get with the broom. So there's definitely some more gaps now. We'll have to take and push some of the sand around. But also this highlights the fact that you don't want to get all of your sand in the joints and then assume you have leftover sand for the edges just yet, because you need to vibrate it into place before you can really truly tell if you are in need of that sand in the field, the main part of the pavers, or if you can now start to fill in those gaps between the house, between the wall and the patio. There's a walkway back there, so John's going around the corner. The walkway extends to the front of the house, and then he'll circle back around to the patio. Can't see him, but you can tell he's dust. It's like pig pen on peanuts. Particular pavers, they are Grandview, which is a 3-piece set, a large rectangle, small rectangle, square that is in the middle, and these are Olympus Grandview pavers. And the big point about that is they have a much larger joint than a Holland, or every company has their version of a Holland, but a Unilock Brussels doesn't really have good big joints. Camelot by Unilock, those types of pavers that have really tight joints are just harder. But that's where a traditional, I'll say, still a newer product, but where a traditional poly sand is going to work better, be more effective in a smaller joint paver. And the larger joints, and you could use certain sands. So this is SEK Poly Sweep. The color is platinum, and this would work in these larger joints and in those really tight joints, those smaller joints. There are other sands that are for wider format pavers, and wider format joints, and natural stone where you can't necessarily or don't necessarily have super tight spaces. You have to be careful that the type of sand you're using is an appropriate match for the type of paver, the size of the joints. You also have to take a look at the application. So if you are doing a pool deck, for example, you want to use certain sands, and there's certain that you want to avoid. If you're doing a driveway, this poly sweep, that would be a great choice for a driveway to help with the interlock. So the reasons you would use a poly sand, mason sand seems to have gone by the wayside in terms of joints, unless you're going to put something like a liquid joint stabilizer on there that's going to hold the sand in place. Poly sand is giving you the polymers, or the plastics basically, that are binding the sand together, that are going to lock tight in those joints. There are a few different colors you could choose from. They're not carried everywhere, so you have to look at your supplier, just your region, which sands are available, which colors. Generally, you can find gray and tan. gray is usually the most popular. What else can I teach you about poly sand? Well, you have to make sure that your pavers, the surface is dry when you apply the poly sand. Otherwise the polymers will activate with the water. You have to also know that the joints of your pavers are dry. If they are wet, then you exacerbate the poly sand wanting to stick close to the surface and not going all the way down. What's that?
Especially clay.
Especially clay, yeah. Clay, so these are concrete pavers. Clay pavers, they hold moisture far longer. And so you really have to make sure that they are dry all the way through and dry around the edges before you put in your sand, or you'll have a mess on your hands. I had another thought and I just lost it. Oh, I know what it was. So whenever you are filling the sand in the joints, sometimes we've had folks that are concerned about the sand not being all the way to the very top, and that's actually not what you want. So the edges of the pavers, you don't want the sand all the way up to the very tip top. You want the sand to be slightly lower than the paver surface. So, I mean, some of those areas that you can see where there's some shadows, it's a little low and it needs to be brought up, but you don't want it just spilling over into the top of the paver itself. And then once it's swept into the joints, then you come back and clean the surface, usually with a blower, and try to get all the excess off so it doesn't cling. And then all this will be activated with water. So this isn't an activity you can do or step to the process that you can do if there is rain in the forecast. Thankfully today is dry, and it's not something that, you know, if it rained the night before, that you can get up the next morning and try to poly right away. You have to let it dry. You especially have to watch around the very edges, places where there are shadows cast, like particularly here where the pavers are going under the siding. That is a place where it could hold moisture a little longer than in the middle where the sun's just hitting it most of the day.
Gotta make sure you're not dripping sweat on there too.
That's really good. I didn't even think about that. It's a really hot day. You want to make sure that you aren't dripping sweat, because any kind of moisture is going to activate the sand. All right, so now that the sand has been vibrated into the joints, the field is taken care of, and start to get into those crevices. There you go, using crevices. I never used that word. It's the second time today. But you want to get into those joints, those spaces around the border. In terms of the pavers and not having the sand all the way topped off, the rationale for that is what?
You don't want them.
I know that you don't, but
because it'll start wearing away.
Okay.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
About 1/8 of an inch below.
Okay. So 1/8 of an inch below the top. I couldn't remember the exact number.
That's below.
And I couldn't remember the reason.
That's below the chamfer.
The chamfer.
The top.
So yeah, I had mentioned that sometimes we'll have homeowners that are concerned with the sand not being high enough, and the reality is the sand shouldn't be all the way to the top, the tip top.
And usually I'll have help doing this while someone's running the compactor.
Mm-hmm. Is that my hint? Right. I think this is probably good for this part. All right, so we're starting at the highest point of the patio, which is up against the back door, working toward the wall, and then working side to side from the rear corner of the house, and we're going to work our way around front. That's the way that the patio slopes. It's on a shower setting, just enough to wet the sand, start to activation process, get that top layer locked in. If you do a more powerful setting, the sand is going to blast out of the joints. And so this is just our first go round. The goal is to keep everything wet. We don't want it to dry out. It's a pretty hot day, so to move quickly. All right, we're coming back for round two. This time, we get a little bit more aggressive with the soaking. Really trying to set the water, or set the sand, get the water down in the joints. Now it's going to start permeating down between the pavers a little bit more, because we're less concerned about getting sand everywhere, just basically from being too harsh. So it's a really hot day. Pavers have been sitting in the sun, and it's even more imperative to just keep everything wet.
Usually you have a lot more time.
Yeah, there's usually more time. We're working in a longer space here. All right, I'm going to stop this. And we're coming back for a third time. Just really getting everything wet. Keep the joints soaked. What's that?
Drinking it in.
It's drinking it in, so that's good. If the water was sitting on top, then it wouldn't be going in the joints. So all that water will slowly work its way down. Get to the bottom. Today we are sealing the patio. We had previously pressure washed everything, blasted all of the sand out of the joints, went back and scraped the joints, and then we let that dry for a few days, and then we put new poly sand in the joints. That has been able to cure for, let's see, probably 4 or 5 days. We let it go and checked it to see how the joints were firming up. And so today we are going to seal, and the sealer we're using is SEKSB 1300. Make sure I get the numbers right. And that is a matte finish, so it's going to have a natural look. So the patio isn't going to change in terms of the coloration. It will have some protection now against moss and mildew in the joints, which we were having problems with, and that will also so stabilize the joints and protect the surface. So we have our shield, which is handy against things like the house and the walls. We have a slit foam roller, which is recommended for this, and then a squeegee, and then the sprayer with the sealer. So
Foam squeegee.
a foam squeegee. Okay, I didn't realize that.
You can't use rubber.
Okay.
Rubber will be worse.
Okay. All right, so foam squeegee. I was wondering why you got one when we had a squeegee, but that makes sense. Okay, I learned something. So the method is we're going to start at the high point, work our way to the low point. So up against the house toward the wall, and then from this end to the opposite end of the house, and then there's a walkway around the corner. Spray a smaller area, squeegee it into the joints. So it's going to be a little bit of a heavier application than just trying to protect the surface. And then we're going to back roll with the slit foam roller and just, yeah, and then move on and just work our way around the house. Okay, so start against the house first. You what? Grab the squeegee first. Say, I think I only have done the rolling part. I don't know that I've ever done the spray. Oops, I guess I have to get over here. Okay, now I'll put this over here. Oopsie. Thought I was at the bottom, but this texture caught me. How far down do you want to go? Halfway? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get it.
About halfway. Okay.
Actually, get one more back walk.
Oops. Alright. These are a lot more textured than the Hollands that I had done. See what you mean. The third set of hands makes a difference. Oh, well. I'm not really squeegeeing a whole lot. Like, I'm not moving a lot of material with the squeegee. I mean, the squeegee's gonna get it in, or is getting it in. Yeah, it's just really dry. So that's something. We know that it's going to rain before the end of the weekend, but we've had several days of dry leading up to this, and so we got up and took a look at the patio this morning. It was dry with kind of one exception, really. It was, yeah, so it's not, they're usually that corner and then that one square paver and then around the side a little bit damp, but that hasn't even been the case. Even yesterday morning, that was not even the case. They've been completely dry. Yeah, I don't really see the squeegee being totally necessary. You're hitting the joints, and so there's seems like plenty of materials getting in there. Like you said, they're large format. So that's just the color of the paper. Oops. Stuck in there. Yeah. It's dripping in one spot, but at least picking it up. The problem is it is dripping. It's at least dripping where I've already been and I'm catching it. This is a good method. Alright, well, where do I put this? Put it here, I guess. Yeah, I think the challenge with these ones versus a smoother surface is just keeping it from pooling in those deeper textures. Whoops. It's definitely nice. Yeah. I mean, that all looks pretty even. Gonna switch again. It is nice that you can see at least where you're at in the moment because of the milky appearance when it's first applied. Looking back over there, you can't tell anything except that it's just wet. And they do pull, even if the sand is set up, you still pull some of the sand when you're doing it. Yeah. That is a good tip. Well, that side just looked like the front to me. Plus it has the sticker still on it from the store, so that at least has some kind of a indication.
Well, it's however you do it. Pick a side,
this is just the paper itself. There was one spot that looked like it hadn't had any application. Let's get this down. Yeah, wow. Went through a lot of sealer and sprayer. It seemed like they're over there in that corner. You had sprayed it a little more heavily. Oh, that's sand. So open. It's not visible in this footage, but up against the wall especially, and up against the house, we have some wider joints filled with poly that absorb a lot of this. This is a smaller sprayer. We had used a larger one where you just take the whole 5-gallon bucket and stick a hose in and just spray straight out of the bucket, and that's handy. So it's probably time to invest in that. Part of the patio is essentially done. The rest of it's just a more narrow walkway. Yeah, we'll just get another bucket. Okay. Oh, okay. No. No, you can at least see it hasn't dried to the point where it's hard to tell where it's been sprayed yet. Probably right where I'm rolling right there. Get a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. So these pavers have been installed for 5 years. I went and checked on that, and they have never been sealed before. So there wasn't, other than cleaning the surface, there wasn't additional prep work. Now, if we were going to do this, if we were to seal this again in, say, 2 years or 3 years, which for a patio that isn't going to see calcium may not be completely necessary. I mean, not really necessary to seal it if we didn't want to, but you would want to do a test to see if there's any sealer left, and especially in the corners where there isn't a lot of foot traffic, and just run a hose, like spray a hose, and see if the water beads up. And if it does, there's still sealer on the surface, and you would want to strip it first before you apply new sealer. And at that point, if this is water-based, if we said we wanted to switch to a oil-based or something, or solvent-based, I'm thinking of paints. Acrylic paint versus oil paint. If we switched, then I don't believe that that would really matter as long as it was stripped off. Or could you mix that or no?
My understanding is you can put solvent over water, but you cannot put water over solvent.
Okay. And that's like
true.
paints. Okay.
That's true for concrete, regular concrete sealer, paver sealer.
This handle? Okay, give me the squeegee of this. was worried about little bugs showing up.
I think they're just out of their honey.
Yeah. I think I blasted them all with the blower. So before we started, we came out and inspected, made sure everything was dry. We used a heat gun on one paver that was wet, and like John said, it was the air conditioner was causing that moisture from up above. So took care of that. The birds had used the patio as a bathroom in a couple of spots, and I just used some baby wipes and wiped it up real quick. And used the leaf blower. I went through 2 times, and then John came through with the broom to get some of the excess sand from around the outer edges, broomed that, and then took a blower on it a 3rd time just to get everything off. Speaking of which, there's one of those little guys right now. Yeah.
Even this guy.
What's that? Okay. I think some of these just don't even really need back rolled. They're just. Mm-hmm.
It's been very hot and dry, so the pores are open. There's no moisture anywhere on the patio, so that's why I feel comfortable even with rain coming this afternoon. Afternoon, early evening.
Within about 12 to 14 hours, we're supposed to possibly see something.
Yeah.
They weren't even confident entirely that it would hit us.
I think we go backwards and just keep working our way out, even though we're going uphill a little bit.
Yeah. So the walkway in the corner where we are right now is really the lowest point, and we have a French drain that takes the water away. But we also have a pile of poly sand in that corner that if we step off of the pavers and stand there, we're afraid of that excess getting on our shoes and causing a problem. Oh. Mr. Spider, you should have stayed over there. You're in the wrong direction, buddy. So at least for us, the summer months are the best to do this is if you go too early into May, all the pollen's falling everywhere, and then too late, which we have encountered, you're contending with a lot of falling leaves and trying to keep those off of the surface. Yeah. So close.
We have more in there. I just don't want to add too much.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like we might possibly use all 5 gallons.
What's that?
So it looks like we might use all 5 gallons.
Yeah.
So these...
Well, that's what they said, right? 80 square feet per,
read it again. So
It's like
80 to 120 if we're trying to use it to stabilize the joints.
Yeah.
And we have, according to my calculations, about 440 square feet total. And these are larger format pavers. They have larger joints, so. Like you said, with the conditions, how dry it's been, it's just soaking it up.
Yeah, but it sounds like we're doing it at the right pace. Isn't this about 500 square feet?
Yeah, we're about 440. So I guess, well, it's all relative to what kind of paver, so that's just their average. It seemed like when we did it on Hollands, we didn't use nearly as much.
It depends, right? They were clay.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole other.
Plus, we weren't using it as a liquid when stabilizer, we were using it just as a
That's true. It was a driveway, and the main goal was
This we're trying to
protecting the surface.
Yeah, this we're trying to use as is. We have water problems in the basement, so that's why we want to just super make sure that we see any points because water's heading off. This particular house is an instance where if we would have used open grade in the back, we would have absolutely nothing but problems.
Yeah. We're on the side of a mountain basically, and we get a lot of the water from the neighborhood. Our whole yard is sloped toward the house. All the way down where?
That one in the middle.
Oh yeah. The patio itself, since we had it, does a good job of shutting the water, getting it away.
Yeah, that alone basically just about fixed our water problems. If the downspouts back up, then we'll get some water in the basement. That's pretty much the only time. Because if I don't have the gutter swing, then we'll run into that problem.
Well, and we get things like, I had never anticipated so many leaves and pine needles and things to get in there, but they definitely do.
A tiny bit more. rub that in. Can you reach out here, I guess?
Yeah.
If we get here, this looks like it's missed.
I would hit that. I think that's where it started to sputter and you're losing some of it. I'll go. At this point, I can. Yeah. The only reason this side is even
So you pump the whole thing.
looks as bad as it does is hitting the underside of the siding.
I didn't want to have to dump it in and dump it back.
Yeah. You might want to hit. There are about 2 or 3 pavers right here. I can't tell if it's just the mix or it looks like it's a little dry. Probably just from this point down, just hit it the whole thing again.
Where at?
See this? There's a couple. Probably just hit those. Oh, that should be good. Yeah, I think it's fine.
About time to pretty close to investing in that spray, definitely for next year.
Yeah, when you were filling that up, I had mentioned that you just take the whole 5-gallon bucket, and you just put a hose down in it, and
Yeah.
it works very nicely.
Alright, I'm gonna go rinse this out.
Okay.
That says let the battery.
What does?
45 minutes.
Hmm. Okay, I think that is it, and just let it dry. And when it dries, because it is matte, it should look exactly the same as it did before it was sealed.